Coming up on The Breakdown, we're going deep in the heart of Texas, where Democrats desperately try to save our democracy, while Republicans try to burn it to the ground. Our guest, former Republican Virginia Congressman and Air Force Intelligence Officer Denver Riggleman, explains how disinformation is baked into the GOP pie. Plus, the Lincoln Project is building a coalition, and we want you to be a part of it. As always, we'll take your questions from Twitter. It all starts now. Good evening and welcome to The Breakdown. I'm Tara Setmayer, and with me as always is the Rick Wilson. We have a great show planned for you tonight. We're going to hear from disinformation hunter and former Congressman, Republican Congressman, Denver Riggleman. We might even talk about Bigfoot tonight, Rick. I know you're very excited.
Yes.
Since you and Steve Schmidt want to have an after-hours show to talk about UFOs and
UFOs, Bigfoot, chupacabras, the Brown Mountain Lights, all the mysteries.
Oh my goodness, the Jersey Devil, you got to include that in there.
Absolutely, the Jersey Devil,
right?
For sure.
Right. Oh,
for
God's sakes. Well, you
Scourge
can
the
talk
Pine Barrens.
Yeah. Oh God. I'm from North Jersey. We always make fun of the Pineys down in South Jersey. It's a whole thing. Anyway, you can talk to Denver Riggleman about that after the show and see if maybe you guys can collaborate with Schmidt on it. But we'll see if we can work in Bigfoot at some point in the show. But before we get started, of course, as always, we want to hear from you, our audience. So please, if you have questions for us, send us a tweet using hashtag #AskTheBreakdown, and we will post some of your questions and answer them later on in the show. Plus, we still have our old school voicemail system ready to go. So be sure to call us and leave us a message. There's the number 855-518-1582. And you just might hear your voice on the show as well. So Rick, before we get to the headlines, let's take a little look at what happened since the last time we were all together. Check out the Lincoln Project's latest ad. Last week in the Republican Party.
What was Donald Trump right about? Everything!
I got impeached twice. I didn't change. I became worse.
Fact check, true.
I think climate change is, as Lord Monkton said, okay? And by the way, it is.
I find great concern with that.
I find great concern with that.
I do believe the election was stolen.
But it was all rejected by the courts, including Trump-appointed judges and the Supreme Court.
I believe the judicial system failed us.
The NFL is gay. Can you believe they are sexually perverting our children right now before our eyes?
Sunder Buche.
Don't come knocking on my door with your Fauci outie. You leave us the hell alone.
The government was hoping that they could sort of sucker 90% of the population into getting vaccinated.
Joe's got a lot of toothbrushes.
It's almost this apartheid-style open-air hostage situation, like, oh, you can have your freedom back if you get the jab.
Critical race theory, 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 critical race theory.
Can't make this stuff up, folks.
Oh, for fuck's sake. I can't. We're going to talk about CPAC in a second because that was just a lot of insanity over the weekend. But I want to talk about the headlines for tonight first, which is Texas and the Democrats.
Sure.
Rick, they say everything's bigger in Texas, and that includes cojones. I tweeted that out earlier because the Texas Democrats said, screw you, we're out of here. And they've left the state because they are in protest over this special session that the governor has called to still put forward and push through this voter suppression bill, which is just as bad as it was the last time they did this a few weeks ago. When you were out, I had Texas Representative Julia Johnson on the show talking about this. And she, there's a picture of some of the legislators there as on their way to the airport to leave and come to Washington, D.C., some of the Texas legislators there. And she was talking about, the voter restrictions and why this is problematic. And I asked her, what's going to happen in this special session being called. And I'm like, are you guys going to break quorum again? And she said, I don't know if we have to. Well, they did. They walked out, and it's about 50 of them. They've arrived in D.C., in the D.C. area here where I live. They arrived in D.C. on Monday because Texas doesn't have any jurisdiction here in protest. And they're prepared to do this for weeks. But I don't know, to what end, though, Rick.
Tara, here's the thing. Our friend Trigby talks about fighting authoritarians. One of the things you have to do is play the game you're in, not the game you want to be in. Yep. So the game they would love to be in is to have a great debate on the floor and change hearts and minds. But they're not in that debate. They'll get rolled over by the majority in the Texas House. And so they have decided to play the game they're actually in. Walk out the door, pull the plug, make it impossible to have a quorum. And then Greg Abbott walked into the trap today completely. He came right into he took the bait completely on this by saying, I'll arrest them when they return.
Right.
Throw me in the briar patch, Abbott. I mean, that's exactly what they want, is to show that these people have adopted the full suite of authoritarian tactics and they've gone completely batty. And so, this is going to be something they're going to have to play a very hard game, and they should not come back there until Greg Abbott and the House leadership says, okay, fine, we will renegotiate this, we will work this out, we will compromise with you. But until then, if the answer is we're going to do something that's going to screw you completely, the answer is, screw yourself. No, we're not going to play the game. We're not going to do this. We're not going to engage in these stunts for no reason. We're doing it to achieve a political end. And unless Abbott and the Republicans agree to make a compromise, they're going to have to sit there in an empty chamber, or a chamber in which they have filled it with their warm bodies, but lacks a quorum for effective legislation to move. Right. And that's the ball game.
For now, though, right? I mean, they have they said that the Texas Democrats said they're willing to stay in D.C. until August 7th, which would be the end of the 30-day special session. But what happens after that, we're not quite sure. Like, how many rounds are they going to do this? And I think that this is important because it's bringing attention to what's happening in Texas. I often refer to the righteous anger of the American people can have an impact on things. And that may actually be the case as long as they continue to do this and bring attention to it and they're clear-eyed about it. You have another Texas legislator there who tweeted out, he said, voting is a sacred right that needs our protection, not be a game with rules that can be rigged to guarantee winners and losers. It's my job and duty to keep that from happening. P.S. While I'm at it, might as well brush up on my critical race theory. At least they have a sense of humor about this whole thing, right?
Right.
But the thing about this too is the audacity of not only the Texas governor threatening to arrest them, which is just absurd. Then you have these other Republican state legislatures, a state senator, Charles Schwertner. He said the Democrats would, quote, face blowback for abdicating their responsibilities in Austin. Are they really? They're not abdicating their responsibilities. No. This is within the rules, right? And they're taking a stand against something that they feel is against the right to vote for their constituents in the state of Texas. And Republicans are being unreasonable.
Tara, once again, the Republicans rely on the Democrats falling for the bait of normalcy all the time. In Washington, Mitch McConnell loosies the football on Chuck Schumer a dozen times a day on the infrastructure bill or whatever it is. And the Republicans in Texas are trying to play that game with the Democrats who have walked out the door to prevent this egregious bill from passing. They're saying, oh, your constituents will be disappointed. They'll be very sad that you weren't here to watch us fuck you over. Come on.
Right.
So, it's important to remember when a Republican goes to the Democrats in whether it's in Congress or the U.S. Senate or the state legislative bodies, as a rule right now, even the ones who pretend they're negotiating in good faith, like the group of 10 in the Senate, Mitch McConnell is never going to let it happen. He's going to fuck you. He's going to leave you high and dry. He is always going to do this. And there are a lot of little Mitch McConnells out there in the states who are doing the same thing. So don't fall for the normalcy bias lie. Don't fall for the thing where they say, oh, well, look, this is we can get back to regular order and normal business. Come on, guys. Come on, don't do this. No. You've got to hold the line. You've got to play hardball. You can't let these people roll you over by pretending to be normal when you know who they are, when you saw who they are at CPAC this weekend, when you see who they are every day by the crazy and crazier and crazier shit they do.
That's exactly right. And, there are human tolls to this. There was a story that that came out about this black voter, 62-year-old man named Hervis Rogers in Texas, who was arrested recently because he cast a vote in the 2020 primary, but he was technically ineligible to vote because he was a felon, a convicted felon on parole. And so but he didn't know. And the statute says that they have to knowingly engage in casting an illegal ballot. And he didn't know. This guy waited in line for 7 hours to vote. CNN actually followed him and waited until after he was done voting. He got in line at like 6 o'clock at night, didn't vote until 1 o'clock in the morning because, that's ridiculous in and of itself that it should take that long for anyone to vote in this country. He had to go to work at 6 a.m. the next day. And he was still there and said he was proud and wanted to vote, talked to, multiple news outlets about the experience. So this wasn't a guy that was clearly, in your face, I'm voting illegally. He thought he had the right to vote. One of the reasons why he was unclear about that was because back in 2007, in the state legislature in Texas, there was a bill that was passed that said that the correctional division and parole division had to make it clear to parolees what their rights were when they were eligible to vote, because a lot of people didn't understand them. But guess what? Even though it passed, it was vetoed by the Republican governor, Rick Perry, at the time. So that never became law. So someone like Hervis Rogers, who was proud to go and vote, thought he was 1 month away from his eligibility, by the way. He was 1 month away from ending his parole. His probation, he was out on parole. 1 month. Now, this is absurd. Not only did they arrest him, there was a $100,000 bail. Come on, $100,000 bail. You know who did this? Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of the state of Texas, who himself is indicted and under investigation in 2 separate incidents, one for financial impropriety and another, I forgot what the other one was for, but an investigation into improper use of his office. There's an FBI.
Hiring. I believe he hired his girlfriend or something to that effect.
Right, or had a donor hire his girlfriend.
Something to that. Right.
But
I'm not. I don't have it 100%, but. Yeah, look,
right.
Ken
You got to be kidding me with this guy. 22,000 hours they used of taxpayer money to try to find voter fraud in Texas, and they found hardly any at all. And they go after this guy, an older black guy who was trying in good faith to vote, to send a message. That is really that is so fucked up. And the bail issue is also something that was on in the legislative chamber as well, that they're trying to revamp cash bail. But all of this is to be intimidating and to send a message, hands down. And I'm glad that the Democrats there aren't sitting back and taking it.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And look, this is something we warn about all the time, folks. The bad guys don't have to win that many more elections for there not to be any real elections. Saddam Hussein had elections every 2 years the entire time he was in office. He used to win by 104%. Kim Jong-un, right? 127% of all North Koreans love Kim Jong-un. Of course they do. They choose their voters. They choose the rules. They count the votes. They determine what's valid and what's not. These folks would love to be in that position. They would love that kind of position.
Trump has said so himself.
Sure, of course. And it's vital that you push back on that. And again, this is a case, you look at a guy like Ken Paxton, who spent the weekend like licking Donald Trump's boots aggressively and getting Trump love in return. He's trying to out-Trump all the other candidates in a growing Republican primary field. And you've got George P. Bush, who's out there also,
what a disgrace to his family name.
Who flew to Bedminster. He looked like a whipped dog sitting next to Trump because he didn't get any love this weekend. These are folks who will burn down anything. Their self-respect, the rule of law, basic justice, basic appeals to civil liberties, to get Donald Trump's approval and to pick the voters they want to pick.
I kind of say something about George P. Bush, and then we're going to talk about CPAC. I tweeted out today because I saw that picture that he put out with his smile, that shit-eating grin on his face, standing next to Donald Trump, and tweeting out about how he appreciates the friendship and support of Donald Trump and how we're going to fight for America and the left is ruining this country. Is he fucking kidding me? What a disgrace. His name should be George P. Cruz. Because he's part of the Ted Cruz family where they sell out their own family members after Donald Trump insults them. Donald Trump insulted his father. Donald Trump insulted the Bush family name. And George P. Bush is standing there, arm in arm up Trump's ass, tweeting about this and thinking that that's honorable. His grandparents are spinning in their graves. The Bushes despise Donald Trump. And that's what their grandson goes and does. Disgraceful. He should be ashamed of himself. George P. Bush, go join the Cruzes. All right, truly. Texas, CPAC. Let's.
It is unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Speaking of
what
Texas
else is
and
unbelievable?
crazy.
Yes. CPAC was happened this weekend. You're thinking, didn't we just talk about CPAC a couple months ago? Well, yes, that's the annual big CPAC that happens. Now they've decided that this is a moneymaker and they're taking it on the road. And they do these summer CPACs now. And this year it's in Texas. And it's used to, what's it stand for? The Conservative Political Action Conference. Yeah, I call it the crazy performative assholes conference because that's what we saw the entire weekend. Let's roll a little bit of Donald Trump. Speaking of assholes.
Trump. Pure bullshit. I got impeached twice. I didn't change. I became worse. Russia. You remember Russia? Two things, right? What are they? Wheels and walls. They never change. Now, if it's bad, I say it's fake. If it's good, I say that's the most accurate poll perhaps ever. I want that toy, Dad, but I also want this one. Eventually, bad things happen. MAGA. Got one house, and that's enough. That's all you need, right, Lou? Doc, how about if I take a cognitive test? We did it, and we aced it, right? I aced it. And one of the doctors said he's never seen anybody that aced it. White House, that's small letters. What? We're going to get him. What did he do? I don't know, but we'll find something. I was banned by sleazebags. I was banned by bad people. Mark Zuckerbucks. They're far worse. I don't say I'm perfect, but they're far worse than I am. And I love that steam in my face. And after a while, people actually believe this stuff.
Oh, my God. First of all, it's like a repeat, right? It's just a repeat of the greatest hits. Right.
Barely scratching the surface. I mean, there was our whole production team was watching this weekend, and we're going back and forth on a chat. And by the end of it, I felt like everyone needed hazard pay because Michelle and Kate and Jeff and everybody else that were working on all this stuff, they're like, I can't believe what I just heard. You and I have been to a jillion CPACs before the era of madness, folks. Listen, here's what used to happen at CPAC. Okay. You'd go to speeches and you'd hear stuff about conservative tax policy or legal strategy or deregulation or various programs stuff that were going to drive out in the States, right? And at night, everybody go get a little lit up. People would go get laid. That was CPAC.
Oh, my God. I don't know about that.
I'm an innocent passenger. But that's
I drink whiskey and smoke cigars. I don't that other part.
That's what it does.
But it's true. It was a party afterwards, a big networking party.
CPAC was what I always called the Rumspringa for the Hillsdale crowd. They were going to go and get crazy for 24 or 48 hours. Anyway, but now it has become a sideshow of insanity, conspiracy, grievance mongering, thinly veiled racial attacks. It's quite something now.
It's out there now, Rick.
Show It is. I mean, I wouldn't go to CPAC.
It's unbearable.
I'd rather visit Bedlam than CPAC. It's madness.
Well, I think there is bedlam at CPAC, and there's also a lot of disinformation at CPAC. Some of the bullshit that they were talking about, that Lauren Bobblehead Boebert dumbass that's out there talking about that Fauci ouchie. You're a member of Congress. Are you? What an embarrassment to the constituents in Colorado. You've got a Fauci ouchie. An actual member of Congress was out there proud of herself, strutting along like some secondhand preacher somewhere. Like,
well,
it was awful.
She looked like she was at some sort of like low rent real estate motivational speakers conference. Like, are you going to sell more property this year? You know, it was this whole
1980s act. Maybe.
Right.
The bad 80s hairband video. She's terrible. I can't. But the point behind this is that people like her because she's another iteration of Sarah Palin and that ridiculousness, that bimbo bobblehead thing going on, that they like it. And you have another guy, you had Alex Berenson, who literally got applause when he talked about how few people actually got the vaccination. Like this GOP death cult was clapping like dumbass seals about the fact that they're not vaccinated. This is insanity. And this kind of disinformation and Trump promoting the big lie and all of this that culminated with the violence of the insurrection, all of this shit is what we're facing today. And you have Fox News that's putting it out there every single day with their personalities. It was so bad, Rick, that Fox actually had to run a banner with a disclaimer while Trump spoke because they didn't want to get sued. That's how bad it was.
About this. I know we have to get to our guest.
Yeah, and then we got to go to break.
Let me say one thing about this. The number of people that are up there praising people who aren't vaccinated, I fucking guarantee you, they're all vaccinated. The number of people on Fox News every night who lie to people and go, there are many questions about the vaccine, and will it give you acne and 5G radiation? Every goddamn one of them is vaccinated. Tucker, Sean, Laura, of them are vaccinated. They want their people.
Trump.
They want to own the libs from the grave, apparently. But right now, it's so good for clicks and culture war, they're going to keep doing it. All right, let's go to break.
All right, so coming up, we're going to talk to our guest tonight, Denver Riggleman, about some of this CPAC craziness. We're going to talk about disinformation and maybe talk a little Bigfoot. We'll be right back.
It was 1988, the AIDS epidemic at its peak. When asked in a debate who he considered American heroes, Vice President Bush praised a young research doctor, Anthony Fauci.
I think of Dr. Fauci. He's a very fine research, top doctor at National Institute of Health, working hard doing something about research on this disease of AIDS.
He's an American hero, a kid from Brooklyn who grew up over his family's pharmacy. At 5'7", he was captain of his high school basketball team, a natural leader. Under 6 presidents, he's quietly worked to keep America safe. In a time when truth is under assault, he's always been straight with us.
So I can say we will see more cases and things will get worse than they are right now.
While President Trump lied.
It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
Now Donald Trump is attacking Dr. Fauci. Why? Because Trump failed America. So he does what he always does, attack and blame.
No, I don't take responsibility at all because...
So who do you trust? Donald, the dope?
Then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute.
Or the doctor? To protect our families, on November 3rd, we can make Donald Trump disappear. It's not a miracle. It's democracy.
And welcome back to The Breakdown. Our guest for tonight's show is Denver Riggleman, former Virginia representative of Virginia's 5th Congressional District. He's also the former CEO of Riggleman Information and Intelligence Group. Denver, welcome to The Breakdown. Glad to have you.
Thank you. And I just want to start that there's a minimum of 4 different types of Bigfoots, Rick. So we can go into that later, but I just want to make sure that everybody knew that. Also, I heard you talking about conflict of interest. My wife did hire me to be the whiskey taster at our distillery. I want to put that out there now. So I'm sorry that I've already crossed the Rubicon when it comes to this. I just wanted to start with those 2 things. So I apologize.
But so in Florida, there are two reputed Bigfoot types: the skunk ape and the palmetto man. So just letting you know.
Yes, and the skunk ape. In my book, Bigfoot is Complicated, I talk about a guy who said he shot the skunk ape over a dumpster, and I go through his entire story. I'm sorry, this has gone out of control already, and I apologize for this. The guy, it was just ridiculous. It was reported in one of the It was reported down in one of the papers in Florida, and I put that in the book about disinformation or people that make things up. And it was a pretty incredible story, but he missed it with a .44 Magnum from 10 feet. So the Bigfoot actually disappeared into thin air, which is the fourth type of Bigfoot, which is the Quebentalor, the mystical Bigfoot. That's an interdimensional long jumper that's here to protect us from the Dracos in the 260 million year war.
I can't.
There you go.
Oh, well,
thank you very much.
Folks.
Thank you very much. I'll be here on Thursday. Try the veal. Good night. Good night, everybody.
Well, Denver, it's great to see you. It's great to talk to you again, man. We talked a lot last fall, and I think we kind of touched on it a couple discussions last year about just how separated the truth and the Republican Party had become, and now it's like this disinformation machine is in. Have you ever seen it in this high of a gear? I mean, it just seems like it's enormously powerful now.
You know, when you said separated, Rick, we were talking about, I don't know if you remember that. I was the only one to speak out on the floor, I think, against QAnon. Yep. I think you guys remember with Tom Malinowski out of New Jersey. We had done that QAnon resolution. You talk about separated, man. I was like the redheaded stepchild. Nothing against gingers, but I was like the redheaded stepchild, on the floor. And I just remember, people tell me, listen, man, you've crossed the line here. You've gone against the big man. You're talking about things that aren't real. There's no way this can become violence. In my speech on December 10th, on my farewell speech, I really touched on the issues that we have with violence when it's radicalized insanity, which, I was counterterrorism for 20 years. I saw it starting in 2001 with Al Qaeda, going through ISIS, going through the Taliban. It's just amazing to me that we're here today. And I think really social media is a big part of it, and the ability to sort of metastasize this digitally.
Mm-hmm.
When you did that, you lost your election in the last election in 2020, partly because ridiculous. It was you were targeted simply because you officiated a gay wedding, which is anathema, I guess, to these folks in Trump land. But didn't Donald Trump endorse you at one point, and then something happened? And talk a little bit about that, about your experience with Donald Trump endorsing you and then losing and speaking out now, because you've been a very vocal dissenter. You're an apostate like us, speaking out against the Republicans.
Well, it's interesting that it was summer of 2019 when I officiated the wedding, and I will tell you this: as soon as I went back to session, I just got, there wasn't a whole lot of support, and I thought that was a little odd based on the fact that it was legal. And I thought the Republican conservative creed was is that we shouldn't try to run other people's lives. I'm sorry, that's just how I felt, right? And I thought there'd be some pushback. But I'm probably the first GOP member that was affected by QAnon. I was accused of being funded by George Soros after that, trying to change the sexual orientation of children. No, I'm not. I know that's crazy. I don't know where that funding comes from. I don't know how that actually works. I don't know is that like Soros bucks? Do I get that at 7-Eleven? I don't know. So I had this, it was bizarre because I had an individual came up to me, and I don't know how blunt I could be on this program, but
seems like blunt as you'd like to.
But there was an angry crowd at a sort of a meeting. I had about 40 or 50 people at a brewery. I know that's surprising, but 40 or 50 people at a brewery. I had an individual come up to me with other individuals behind him, and he goes, "Hey," he goes, "you're going to lose. You're cursed by God, and you're a general of the sodomite armies." And I had never heard that. We got into
my response would have been, "I'm a field marshal of the sodomite army."
I wasn't quite sure. Well, being military, Rick, that's good. Being military, we got into this. My staff had to come over because I think he wanted a confrontation, right, with a sitting congressman. Sure. But I said, well, where did you hear this? Right? I mean, where did you hear all these things that I'm funded by George Soros? I'm a general of the sodomite armies. I'm here to force churches to conduct gay weddings. I'm here to to hurt children. And I think you guys are hearing this theme. I didn't know that this was the undercurrent of QAnon in late 2019 until I looked at it about that week, right? Well, he goes, well, I read this somewhere. Like, I read this about you. And I said, man, that's a surprise. I didn't know you could read. So that really was hurtful for the dialogue after that. But yeah, that's the issue that I had, is that, guys, even with the Trump endorsement, and Terry, you were talking about that, I had to decide whether to take it. And I had an individual tell me, and here's where I think you guys will find this interesting, to be as blunt and transparent as possible. I had a great group of guys. They said, Denver, you're against a awful candidate. Crazy. If you're not a little bit crazy, you can't be crazier. And that is what I've heard from so many of my buddies in the Republican Party, is that we have to be a little crazy right now, whether it's in our fundraising pitches, in our language. We have to do this. And I've been pushing back, saying, right now, there could be some short-term gain in 2022 with gains, or even in 2024. But the long-term issues with disinformation is a complete breakdown of facts-based policy discussion and a complete breakdown of trust in the government. And when you see that, you see violence. Now we're back to January 6th. Now we're back to that cycle where there's this apocalyptic conspiracy theory where it's all about good and evil and not about facts. And I think that's incredibly dangerous. It's just my opinion.
For sure.
What's the scariest piece of disinformation you've come across? Because there is some crazy shit out there. And I can only imagine, as a disinformation hunter, that you've come across some lunacy.
When I saw the achievement Christmas card, they're so funny. I
don't know whether you should laugh or cry, right?
I don't. I mean, I think there's some that really got me out of the blue. I think the whole when Donald Trump retweeted that Joe Biden killed SEAL Team 6, I think that was that. I know that's not one of the crazier ones, but it was crazy that it was retweeted. And if you follow that thread, you go to a YouTube video with 1.7 million followers. I think it was called The Next News Network, with Anna Kate, who was a Survivor contestant or something like that. And it was totally batshit. It was like watching, a cross between The Twilight Zone, and Pet Cemetery. I just wasn't quite sure what I was looking at. But I think it's the fact that we have 3-star generals like McInerney or like Flynn pushing these conspiracy theories. And I think there's crazy ones. I mean, we can talk about the pedo cabals. We can talk about that. We can talk about, lasers changing votes. We can talk about burning, ballots in white vans. Right. We could talk about reptilian humanoids. Right. We can do that. But what's crazy is that Stop the Steal, I think, is one of the most pervasive pieces of disinformation that I've seen, that I can remember. And the fact is, it is baked in. And that's the deep state, New World Order, Great Reset, Storm, all of that, the Great Awakening, all of that is now baked in, is that there's a deep state cabal that's trying to take away the rights of the Republicans specifically. And I think that's the scariest thing, Tara, is how pervasive it is. It's a digital virus. And I think it's actually gotten a little worse, not better, as we pushed forward after January 6th.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the scope of it that's out there. I mean, one night I was looking at, I was in the YouTube hole one night, and I found this video of this woman. It's like a 2-hour video about how a big chunk of it was like how the Lincoln Project planned the 1/6 attacks, and we're behind it. And how did Rick and Tara know what was going on? They did a video that very night. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, well, I didn't know you both were FBI agents, number one.
Right.
And well, you think this is turned over. I think the false flag theories immediately afterwards. I don't know if you remember this, and you guys, you probably remember more than I do, but when Matt Gaetz tweeted out that they knew that it was Antifa. I don't know if you remember that. Proof. Do you remember that? Which I knew was absolute horse crap. First of all, I know imagery pretty well. I know imagery intelligence. I know how facial recognition works. I worked in biometrics, worked with identics technologies, some old school stuff. When I read that, I'm like, that's just horseshit. I mean, that's not a thing, right? And if there was some kind of
it came from
facial
Matt
identity,
Gaetz, so of course.
Well,
of course,
but if there was facial identity, yeah. Well, the thing was, you can do it, and what they found out, it wasn't Antifa people they looked at. They were looking at Trump supporters, right, with the few that they were able to identify using that technology. And that false flag has now really steamrolled into now it was peaceful. FBI, whoever was involved, the false flag theory has to continue to flex as you disprove it. And if you look at the 500 plus arrests, you look at what happened to people like Mike Fanone or Brian Sicknick, and I know the Sicknick family, I know Sandra, and I met her mom. What a precious lady. I know Mike Fanone. I just find it astounding that we're even having a conversation about this when the facts are readily available for all to see. This isn't a dream
On
sequence.
video. Right, it's
On
on
video.
video. Multiple videos. These dumbasses put it on their Twitter and social and Facebook feeds, like their own video. The courts are releasing these videos every single day. And then you have people like Megyn Kelly, however you felt about her before, who you would consider reasonable people, pushing the narrative that the media has overblown this. For a career boost, I guess. I don't know. It is insane to me. And it's so disrespectful to the 140 police officers who suffered injuries that day and who beat back that violent mob and beat back those bastards that were out to kill the vice president and anybody else they got their hands on. And yet you still have people who we expect to have credibility trying to downplay this, that it was a love fest, that it wasn't that big of a deal. It's insane. And Denver, I know that you talked about Kevin McCarthy's response to this and how it's anathema to the support, the back the blue and supporting law enforcement that Republicans for years campaigned on and would throw out insults to liberals that the liberals don't support the police and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I come from a law enforcement family. Those who watch the show know that. I bleed blue. And to listen to these disingenuous SOBs try to sit there and say that what the media overblew it or it was Antifa and what happened to law enforcement that day is absolutely unconscionable. And I know you've had some things to say about Kevin McCarthy's response to this too.
Well, when he first responded to it, I was pretty proud of it. I'm like, he's correct. Remember the first response was, I'm like, that is correct. But I think once you have polling or fundraising, or maybe he got a phone call, what I have found interesting.
Oh, not maybe.
So, boy, wouldn't I like to have the call detail records from that day? I think
that's coming.
Well, I do too. Anyway, so here's what I like. I'm stealing this line that I heard, and I can't remember. There's been multiple people that said it. And I think when I saw this, I'm like, my goodness, I've been trying to encapsulate it, right? Like, what does this mean? Is this a cult? Is this just this overwhelming belief system of good against evil that I can't break through with facts, whether I try to use humor, whether I try to use a sober way of looking at this, whether I just try to use, this sort of a decision tree, right? I try to use this matrix of what happened and nothing works. And somebody said something and I heard it today and I had read it a few months ago and I don't know where it came from. It wasn't me, but they said there's a thin line between cult and culture. And when I saw, I'm like, that's where we're living right now. Wow. We're living in that line, right? Really we're living in that line. And that's what I'm trying to think. And I it's not mine. I just wish, and listen, I've been disowned by friends, by family members. And especially when I present facts. It's not like if I just sit and patted them on the back and I'm like, hey, I get it, man. I'm not quite sure it's okay, but hey, we're at a family reunion. Let's just have some macaroni salad and some fried chicken, and we're gonna go along and get along. But usually, what I say is like, hey, that's just not true. And as soon as I say that, I'm telling you, or if I say, let's talk about facts, there's an immediate, visceral, angry reaction to a lot of people that I'm talking to. When you go and I'm going back to McCarthy. Tara's like, oh my gosh, she's taking this full circle. This is brilliant.
No,
I'm kidding. I don't know if it's really not. But I think what happens is if you lose that piece of you that belongs to that tribe, I think you feel rudderless. I think you're afraid. I think we're not looking at the personal component of this to a lot of people, is that there's a lot of fear from leaving the tribe. And I'm willingly tribalist right now. Now, like, will I be a Republican when I run again? I don't know. I don't know what I am, right? I'm a fiscal conservative and more social liberal. But what if you could not leave the tribe and you're willing to be sort of led, you're willing to be emasculated, you're willing to have these things happen to you just so you go along to get along. I've been there. I've been in the club. It's hard to leave the tribe. It's ridiculous to leave. Why would I do that? I could have won. Why would I do that? I mean, what idiot would say, oh, you know what? I wasn't in politics. I was a one-term congressman. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and I don't think officiating a same-sex wedding is something that should get me kicked out of the tribe. This is really good for people. This is a good thing. This is inclusive. This is what Republicans want to be. I sort of got ripped apart, and then the conspiracy theory started, and guess what happened? The support left me. And so you get to the point, you're like, well, what am I then? What am I doing? How do you serve in this environment? And I think it's really a fear of losing the tribe or leaving the tribe, or thinking that winning is the only thing. I think both of those are very dangerous to a republic where you have to have some integrity in decision making.
Couldn't agree
Absolutely.
more. And you're so on point. The cultural differences of walking away from that campfire and out into that dark night, it takes a lot to do it, and it takes a lot to stay away from it. And the only thing that makes it easier right now is that they've become so insane.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that if it was like a sort of, I mean, if there was a balance point, right, you're like, well, listen, I don't agree with these things, but we can talk about this in a policy way. But when I have my buddies come up to me and say, Denver, just do it, man. Just do this. You're going to win. You're going to miss the juice, man. If you lose, don't do this. And when I walked away, I'll tell you, there's a part. Yes. Yes, that's a quote, by the way. Somebody told me I would miss the juice, and I love them. But I'm like, I don't know if I want to drink this Kool-Aid. This is not the juice I signed up for, right? And
right.
Exactly.
Right. And that's the thing is, and I have such good friends in there that would, when they're going to watch this, they're going to call me and like, Dan at Denver, I'll drink a bourbon, but this is bullshit. You know what we got to do to win. I get it. I've been there. I've been in the trenches. I've seen what happens. I want a conservative party that's not crazy. I don't want conservative to equal crazy. I want conservative to equal sober, policy-minded individuals who put people above their own careers. That's it. If we had that, I think that would solve a lot of problems.
For sure.
Absolutely. Well, we are going to continue this conversation with you after we take a quick break, and we'll talk a little bit more about Bigfoot, CPAC, and disinformation with Denver Riggleman. We'll be right back.
Yay.
My relationship with this gentleman is outstanding.
Does Mitch call the shots now, Donald? Yes, he does. He says he runs the Republican Party. The party you built.
Excuse me.
He's the boss now. He's even taking shots at you.
A mob was assaulting the Capitol in his name.
When did Mitch overpower you?
Maybe I'll have to leave the country. I don't know.
No power. He doesn't care what you think of candidates. He's in charge.
We were winning everything.
He'll pick them himself. No control.
And all of a sudden it was just called off.
And they'll be loyal to Mitch. You can't beat him. Not you.
Our weak Republican leadership.
Is this still your party or not? You can't keep up. You're losing your base. They've forgotten you. They're calling you Mitch's cuck. He's stronger than you. If you don't do something soon, loser, you can kiss 2024 goodbye.
McConnell is hopeless, and he can't stop anything.
Welcome back to The Breakdown, and we are here with former Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman, and he is an expert on all things Bigfoot because he wrote a book called Bigfoot. It's complicated. Go for it, Rick.
So, Denver, you're the one man I know. You, my friend, can put together an arc from Bigfoot to QAnon to CPAC. And
yes,
tell us why these three disparate things are bound together in a glorious ethereal arc of insanity.
I'm
first
excited for this.
First of all, they're all fantasy. But no, so let's put QAnon in the middle of that, right? QAnon is like this conspiracy sticky bomb, right? Everything sort of sticks to it. It's not just, there's a Democratic cabal of pedophiles. It's Stop the Steal. It's some New World Order stuff. It's globalist stuff. It's the Great Awakening. It's the Great Reset. It's COVID as a socialist, sort of this socialist plot to not only take over America, but also to control us through vaccinations. All of this sort of nests under this sort of QAnon sticky bomb. Some of it sits outside in the New World Order, COVID 1984 circles. Some of it, might trick out to the new truthers, like the 1-6 truthers and things like that, right? But it's all sort of this sticky mess of conspiracy-minded individuals. So you have QAnon, and you have all these nested things underneath of it. Well, Bigfoot is not just a singular Bigfoot. Bigfoot, right, has different belief systems. There's 4 different types of Bigfoots. Just like with QAnon, Bigfoot is a hirsute sticky bomb, right? So you have the biological entities, you have the UFO Bigfoots who like to come down like ET. They're just like bigger, stinkier, and scare the hell out of you. Then you have the Magic Man Bigfoot theory of Native American legend. Then you have the Quiventadora, which is the interdimensional long jumper, which is helps us with the 12-strand DNA beings that are sort of on an energy plane. They can go from dimension to dimension, like the reptilian humanoids or the Dracos or the Brainu and all these different types of mutt races that come out of the other dimensions and out of the other harmonic universes. So you have this Bigfoot stuff where people disagree, they agree, they don't like each other. You have this QAnon sticky stuff that goes on. So you have these disbelief systems where people are actually caught up in it regardless of facts, right? This is real. Bigfoot speaks to me. He speaks to me telepathically in French. Oh, I love this guy, right? And so you have this. Then you have QAnon, which you have people like, who speaks to me? God speaks to me, tells me that Trump is blessed. You have this almost evangelical bent to some of this, right? So they're almost religious. Then you go to CPAC. What I said is CPAC to me almost reminded me of a religious revival. And when you talk about the concepts that were talked about in there, they were absolutely flaky. I would love if they just talked about taxes, right, or spending. Or listen, I don't think the spending's great on infrastructure. I will fight you on the $6 trillion spending bill because I'm a fiscal conservative. But I will fight you on policy because I've read the bill. I'm not going to tell you that the $6 trillion bills or any of that was written by aliens. I'm not doing that. So what you have is that you have this man. So what you have.
The disclaimer is that what you just listed, people actually believe all of this stuff. And there is a juxtaposition with QAnon and with what happens at CPAC and what's going on in the Republican Party, which is why we're not in it anymore. But go ahead, Denver.
And if you look at all this across the spectrum, here you go. You ready, Rick? Are you ready for this? It's one big freaking LARP. And that's the problem I have with this. Right?
Yep.
That's the problem I have is that we have to stick with facts and policy. And it's funny because people are like, well, you're a liberal, you're Rothschild, Soros baby, right? I'm like, I have a 100 heritage score. How does that happen, right? And you're like, oh my gosh. Right. And you're like, what is he? He is weird, right? And I think that's the issue that you have is that all of this is a continuation and thread that when belief systems are more important than facts, we have a real problem. And CPAC was really, it was just a rehash of superstition and things that weren't real in many ways. And that's the frightening part to me as somebody who's been in counterterrorism is how do you stop radicalization? I'll end with this. The thing that scared me the most wasn't exactly January 6th, even though it was sort of the event. What scared me was your indicator when the individual blew up the block in Nashville because he thought people were reptilian humanoids or that infrastructure was controlling us, right? There were indicators. And I guess that's the thing, guys, is that if somebody can blow up a city block believing in reptilian humanoids, what stopped people from this good against evil, Soros, Rothschild funded deep state cabal is trying to control you with vaccinations? That's what scares me. Harry, there you go, Rick. Did I do okay?
And rightly so. And rightly so.
That's right. Absolutely. It scares us too, which is why we do what we do here at the Lincoln Project, why we talk about this, bring attention to it. We bring folks on like you and others who are experts in this to explain to our supporters and to get the word out, because we operate in reality and we operate in fact, and the truth is their kryptonite. And as long as we continue to push back on this, we have to believe that there's more of us than them, but we have to be vocal about it. We can't sit back and just complain in our own bubbles. We have to take the steps and point it out and do something about it. Before we let you go, Denver, I was going to ask you why you used a squatty potty reference to refer to CPAC, but I could only imagine.
So that would, I don't know why you guys do research. You embarrass me so. I think
there was no way I could let that go.
No,
because Boebert said Fauci, ouchie, or ouchie, Fauci, or whatever on that thing.
Right.
And I was talking to Charlie. I'm like, what are we using? I mean, what are we in third grade? We're going to go Fauci, ouchie, and the squatty potty, And he's like, what the hell is a squatty potty? I'm like, Dude, if you don't know what Squatty Potty is, you're missing out.
Right.
But
You got a whole separate thing.
You got a whole separate thing going. So Squatty Potty was me referencing people using stupid rhymes where they should be serious politicians. That's what it was, and then it really got away from us after that, Tara.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. So before I let you go, what are some things that people who are similar to you and I and Rick, where we have this. We're not progressives, but we're not Republicans as the party represented anymore. We're a little politically homeless, but our ideology is still intact. What do you say to the people who are looking to leave the tribe, that want to step out the way we did? Because it's not easy to do. You're right. So what's your advice to them?
I would first tell them that leaving the tribe is uniquely American. I mean, that's the first thing I would tell them, right? Is that we don't have to be part of one side or the other. It's not sort of the American way. We're allowed to fight and scrap. If we want to start a third movement or a fourth movement, we're allowed to do that. I don't have to be beholden to party ideals or two corporations that seem to want to control this country, where money is really the root cause of why they exist, whether you're Republicans or Democrats. You have this ability as a free-thinking human to start and do whatever you want to do. Now, are you going to win? I don't know. You could lose a lot when you start, right? Or if you want to get into politics, but you're allowed to use your own voice. And I would also tell them this: don't be afraid. I mean, bad things can happen. I get it. I'm afraid every day in some way or another, based on whether death threats I get or things like that, or my family being out there. There's some times when I'm like, man, should I be doing this? Am I leaning too far forward? I'm seriously. But then I think I hate bullies. And that's also uniquely American. We're allowed to be who we are. We're allowed to hate bullies. We don't have to be part of a tribe. We can live free. And actually, we can create a tribe of the tribalists that just believes in facts. I don't have to call myself a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green. I don't have to call myself anything. And I won't. If I don't want to, I won't. And you could pound sand if you want to try to, define me or give me a label. And that's really what I tell people when I talk about it. And I'm like, here, have a bourbon. Because I own a distillery and I write books about Bigfoot. And I've been accused of Bigfoot erotica. Why do I give a hell? Right? So let's just go have fun. Let's fight for the freedom. Let's fight for freedom in this country, and let's just do the best we can. That's
it. That's it. Denver, listen, what my old boss in Congress used to say, we're going to fight for freedom and have fun. And that's exactly what we're doing. And sometimes it's hard. And sometimes, you go, what am I doing? But you know what? It's worth it. And you never let the bullies, you never let them bully you into silence. And I think that you are a sufficient example of that, my friend. Denver Riggleman, it has been a pleasure.
Talk soon,
if you're into
brother.
Bigfoot, folks, check out his book. Follow Denver on Twitter. And we'll stay. It's glad to have you in the fight.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you very much.
Have a great night, brother.
See you later.
We got to come down to his distillery. We got to come and drink some bourbon with you. He's not too far from me here, where I live out in Northern Virginia. Oh man, that was a lot of fun. I don't think ever in my, my media or political career have I ever talked that much about Bigfoot. Okay, we're going to take some of your Twitter questions tonight because I can imagine that they are interesting. What's our first tweet? Okay, what type of legislation needs to be written to control cable networks from labeling broadcasts as news when there are no facts, substantive conclusions, or journalistic integrity? That's from Jody Sheridan. Rick, I don't know if we can actually legislate that. They do that over there in Britain. And
Jody,
there's
an awful lot of First Amendment overlap here that makes it very, very difficult to do that. People often say like, oh, the fairness doctrine. Well, it only applied to very narrow broadcast cases. It only applied in a kind of gray area. It was never really as effective as people thought it was. It did not bring balance into the news. The thing we can do is to try to build out new ways to get information, to build trusted networks of our own, to go to places where you're going to recognize that sometimes you're not going to have the same scale as a Fox or an MSNBC or a CNN, but you're going to get something you trust and you understand the value and validity of it. It's a tough question. And right now we really are in a moment where our media, our social media, our tech companies, et cetera, are all in a status where they are basically either functional monopolies or functional, or very nearly so. And Biden is doing a little bit to address it. It's a long, high hill to climb, but it's very, very difficult to place content restrictions on the broadcast of news and First Amendment protected information.
And you don't necessarily want to go down that road. You know, it sounds good now, but when the shoe is on the other foot, when the tables are turned, that can be a very dangerous thing. You don't want that pendulum to swing the other way, and then we end up in a even worse, more realistic Orwellian nightmare when you start having the government controlling content. So,
right. So when President Josh
Hawley,
if we form some sort of
forbid.
national news media truth board, and President Josh Hawley stacked it with 5 of his appointees, and they said, well, you're not allowed to mention that we're an authoritarian hellscape now.
Right.
You can't use the word Democrat.
Right. Right.
You know.
And that's why we talk about authoritarianism and why we point, we point this out, because we don't ever want to get there. So we have to be very reasonable and strategic about the fights that we fight and what we want government to actually do. All right. Next question. BDK, aka K4. That is a mouthful. Okay, what do Republicans hope to gain from their anti-vaccine stance? Elections have been won and lost on the number of people dying from COVID. Now that the vaccine has become political, the deaths will be more one-sided. Rick, we're already seeing this. I just saw a poll that showed that something like 80% of Democrats are vaccinated, and less than 50% of Republicans are or plan to get vaccinated. We're already starting to split our country into the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. And this is problematic because it actually impacts other people that are trying to be safe, that don't want the irresponsibility and selfishness of these other people. They're trying really hard to encourage people to do the right thing. This is literally life or death. And you have millions of Americans that are taking a political stance, saying that they're not going to get vaccinated to prove some kind of political point. You've said it. They want to own the libs from the grave.
Right. It is a culture war that will lead to the deaths of tens or hundreds of thousands of more people in this country. 99.5% of the deaths of COVID in the last month have been to unvaccinated individuals. And I want to point this out again. Every goddamn host on the Fox News network that is out there raising questions about vaccines is in fact vaccinated. Tucker, Sean, Laura, Janine, Rupert Murdoch got vaccinated in January about 30 seconds after it was available. Not one of these people is unvaccinated. They are lying to their audience, and their audience is buying it, and they're going to die because of it. And you know what? I don't want to even joke about it and say, oh, well, just thin the herd, or it's Darwin's waiting room. These people are unbelievably irresponsible, and they are led by people who believe a victory in the culture war is worth stacking up the bodies. You know, Stalin once said, if you kill 100 people and 5 of them were enemies of the state, that's a pretty good ratio. Well, that's the same thought here. If you do this and you win a culture war battle, it's okay to kill, an enormous number of people. It is
Don't take our word
disgusting.
for it, Rick. They don't have to take your word for it or mine. Just go watch Newsmax. There was a Newsmax anchor that made this argument about that, vaccines get in the way of basically nature, and that there are some people that are supposed to die in groups, and vaccines get in the way of that. This is nihilistic, sadistic, sick shit. And this is what people are ingesting and in large numbers, and is being accepted as mainstream news for the right wing. It's unbeliable. But we got to go to a quick break.
Yep.
Go ahead, Rick.
No, it's just true. It's astounding.
It is. We're going to take a quick break, but next up, we're going to celebrate our victory from the Toyota ad last week, and we have a little bit of a ask from you, our Lincoln Project audience. We'll be right back.
We will march through the South, through the streets of Jackson, through the streets of Danville, through the streets of Cambridge, through the streets of Birmingham. But we will march with the spirit of love and with the spirit of dignity that we have shown here today.
John Lewis. He was jailed and beaten, but never bowed. The son of sharecroppers, He was one of the first freedom riders. Attacked by a mob and left for dead in a bus station in Montgomery, Alabama, he got back up and led the fight for justice. That was John Lewis. He always got back up and never quit. Surrounded and assaulted by hate, he rejected violence and embraced love. For over half a century, he showed us the true meaning of courage and dignity. Today, America is in another crisis, and a new wave of hate is once again embraced by the powerful to hold on to their power. In the days ahead, let us be guided by the courage of John Lewis. He never quit. He always got up. He knew a better day belonged to those who had the courage to act. Now it's our turn.
We must say, wake up, America, wake up, for we cannot stop, and we will not and cannot be patient.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
And welcome back to the breakdown. As we end our show tonight, we wanted to show you all our Toyota ad that took the internet by storm last week. And it in less than 6 hours, Toyota responded. And guess what? They completely backed down. Take a look at the ad.
America's free market democratic system has been good for companies like Toyota for a long time. So why would Toyota support politicians who try to overthrow the very system that's been so profitable for them?
1953 model GOP has real class.
Toyota's given more money than any company to the seditious politicians who voted to overturn the 2020 election result. They even hired Mitch McConnell's former chief of staff as a lobbyist. Toyota's #1 at finding ways to financially reward the very party that took our nation to the brink on January 6th, helping finance a movement that violently sought to take votes away from American customers, not to mention Toyota's own employees. It's time to call Toyota's corporate leadership. If they don't reconsider where they send their money, Americans will reconsider where we send ours.
Man, like I said, Rick, go ahead. 6 hours later, by the way, folks, after we started running that ad and we put out our appeals, Toyota backed down. Go ahead.
I want to say two things. I want to offer two words of thanks. First off, I want to thank the Toyota dealers, who I understand were the folks that were calling. They were getting a lot of pressure from our people. They were hearing from them. I want to thank the Toyota dealers for calling Toyota USA. I want to thank the guys at Toyota USA for realizing that just because you hire Mitch McConnell's former chief of staff as a lobbyist doesn't mean you should listen to them all the time. And they did the right thing. It's a lesson for a lot of other corporate America that you've got to push in, and you've got to make sure that people understand you're not kidding around, you're not joking around. You mean it when you say you don't want them funding seditionists, you don't want them funding people who back a violent insurrection. So we'll be back with more of these things as we go forward. We're going to pick and choose our targets carefully. Of companies that are continuing to engage in bad behavior. We're going to pick places where we think we can at least move the needle. They won't all be as easy as Toyota. Look, some are going to be much tougher than Toyota. But I will say this, we're not out of that fight, because the corporate America folks that are still looking at giving money to the Republicans going forward, they're going to hear from us. I also want to once again thank all of our followers, our supporters, the friends of the Lincoln Project, Lincoln voters. You guys did this. We set off the blast. You charged into the gap. You made the calls. You got up in Toyota's grill. You called the dealers. You called the dealership folks. You called the national number. You got involved with it. You sent emails and tweets and everything else. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. We can't do this without you folks. Your support in fights like this means that we are a much bigger organization in terms of impact and ability to deliver good results for this country than we could have ever imagined. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Amen, Rick. As I always say, there is no Lincoln Project without all of you.
That's right.
And the righteous anger of the American people has impact. So what we're asking of you is to show us, tell us in videos, send us a selfie video and tell us how you have been motivated by what the Lincoln Project has done, or your involvement with the Lincoln Project, and what you have done, people you've brought in with you to join this movement with us to help build on the momentum, because we are a pro-democracy group. We are part of that team, and we want to hear from you guys. So send us your selfie videos telling us why you joined the movement, and if you brought anybody with you, get them to come on with you. Tell us your story and use hashtag Lincoln Voter. All right. And tag 3 of your friends and get them to help join our team, because like I said, we can't do this without you. Thank you guys so much. Remember, hashtag Lincoln Voter. Send us your videos. Keep them, a minute or less, but send them to us because we want to hear from you. Right. All right, guys. Well, it has been a great show, and we want to make sure that you listen to our podcast. The Lincoln Project podcast is everywhere podcasts are found: Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You know how to find us, so make sure you subscribe and take a listen. And tomorrow, don't forget to watch our sister show, We're Speaking at 8. We'll see you again on Thursday at 8 p.m. on The Breakdown. Good night.
Thanks, folks.
One thing about Donald Trump is not just all of the bad things that come with him. He allowed people who otherwise might have had bad thoughts to now express them without much social retribution.
Well, they're burning the house down. Please protect yourself.
Vice President speaking.
This is an embarrassment. If you count the legal votes, I easily win.
What the fuck?
Have some faith, I'll make you a believer.